Welcome to An Interview in History. Imagine a podcast that serves as a bridge across time, connecting listeners to the voices of history's most impactful figures. Each episode is a deep dive into the lives and legacies of these individuals, exploring not just their well-documented achievements, but also uncovering lesser-known facts that shaped their contributions to our world. From scientists who unlocked the mysteries of the universe to activists who fought for social change, each story is a testament to the indelible mark they left on society. This journey through history will not only educate, but also inspire listeners to appreciate the intricate tapestry of human progress. Welcome to this edition of An Interview in History. This week, we're talking with Margaret Brown, posthumously known as the Unsinkable Molly Brown. She was an American socialite and philanthropist. She was a survivor of the RMS Titanic, which sank in 1912, and she unsuccessfully urged the crew in lifeboat number 6 to return to the debris field to look for survivors. She's agreed to share her story with us. This interview takes place on February 13th, 1932. Welcome, Mrs. Brown.
Well, thank you, but please, call me Margaret. I never did go by Molly, although I was given that name after my involvement on the Titanic.
I'd love to start at the beginning. Could you tell us about your childhood?
Of course. I was born Margaret Tobin on July 18, 1867, in Hannibal, Missouri. My parents, John and Johanna Tobin, were Irish immigrants, and they worked hard to provide for me and my siblings, Daniel, Michael, William, and Helen. Both of my parents had previously been married to other spouses who had died. So, I had two half-sisters, Catherine Bridget Tobin, who was my father's first marriage, and Marion Collins, by my mother's first marriage. I was called Maggie by my family. We were a close-knit family, though we didn't have much. I grew up near the Mississippi River, and like many kids in Hannibal, I loved to read. Mark Twain was from my hometown, and his stories really sparked my imagination.
Did you attend school?
I did, though my formal education was modest. I attended a local school run by my aunt, Mary O'Leary, which was across the street from my home. But life wasn't about schooling for long. I had to work to help support my family. By my teenage years, I was working in a tobacco factory. It was tough work, but it taught me resilience. Nearby was also the Hannibal Gas Works, where my father worked as a laborer. Our neighborhood was a tight-knit Irish Catholic community where people traveled westward through the town for the gold fields.
You eventually moved to Colorado. What led you there?
Yes. When I was about 18, my older brother Daniel moved to Leadville, Colorado, and I followed him out there in 1886, along with my other sibling, Marion Collins Landrigan, and Mary Ann's husband John Landrigan. I, along with my brother Daniel, shared a 2-room log cabin, and I found work sewing carpets and draperies at a dry goods store, Daniels, Fisher, and Smith. Daniel was a miner. That's where I met my husband, James Joseph Brown, JJ, as I called him. He wasn't a wealthy man at the time, but he had ambition. I wanted a rich man, but I loved Jim Brown. I thought about how I wanted comfort for my father and how I had determined to stay single until a man presented himself who could give to the tired older man the things I longed for him. Jim was as poor as we were and had no better chance. I struggled hard with myself in those days. I loved Jim, but he was poor. Finally, I decided that I'd be better off with a poor man whom I loved than with a wealthy one whose money had attracted me. So, I married Jim Brown. We married in 1886 and had 2 wonderful children, Lawrence and Catherine.
So then your wealth came later. How did that happen?
JJ worked as a mining engineer, and in 1893 he struck it rich when he developed a new way to extract gold from an otherwise played-out mine. JJ's mining engineering efforts proved instrumental in the exploration of a substantial ore seam at the Little Johnny Mine. Ibex Mining Company awarded him 12,500 shares of stock and a seat on the board. In Leadville, I helped by working in soup kitchens to assist miners' families. Practically overnight, we went from working class to millionaires. But I never forgot where I came from. I used my wealth to help others, especially women and children in need.
I understand you and JJ had a house in Denver.
Yes, we did. We bought a Victorian mansion in Denver. Then, in 1897, we built a summer house, Avoca Lodge, in southwest Denver near Bear Creek, which gave the family more social opportunities. I became a charter member of the Denver Women's Club, whose mission was the improvement of women's lives by continuing education and philanthropy. Adjusting to the trappings of a society lady, I became immersed in the arts and fluent in French, German, Italian, and Russian. I co-founded a branch in Denver of the French Alliance to promote my love of French culture. I also lobbied for women's right to vote.
Well, then, regarding your philanthropy, were there specific groups that you enjoyed helping more than others?
Oh, absolutely. While I believed in helping anyone in need, I had a special place in my heart for working-class families, women, and children. Coming from a humble background myself, I knew how hard life could be, especially for immigrants and those struggling to make ends meet. I worked tirelessly to improve workers' rights, supporting miners and their families in Leadville and beyond. I also fought for women's rights, education, suffrage, and independence were so important to me. In fact, I even ran for Senate before women had the right to vote. And of course, after the Titanic, I raised thousands of dollars for the survivors who lost everything. But the group that really touched my heart was children in need. I helped establish schools and worked with charities to make sure orphans and underprivileged kids had opportunities for a better future. If I could help someone rise above their circumstances, that was always my goal.
I understand that at about this point, you and JJ were starting to grow apart. Do you want to talk about that?
JJ was not interested in the social life that I enjoyed, and we began to drift apart. After 23 years of marriage, we privately signed a separation agreement in 1909. I received a $700 monthly allowance so I can continue my travels and political work.
Okay, so now this brings us to your travels. You were on the Titanic in 1912. Can you tell us about that experience? And how did you end up on the Titanic?
I spent the first months of 1912 in Paris, visiting my daughter and as part of the John Jacob Astor 4 party until I received word from Denver that my eldest grandchild, Lawrence Palmer Brown Jr., was ill. I immediately booked passage on the first available liner leaving for New York, the RMS Titanic. Originally, my daughter Helen was supposed to accompany me, but Helen, who had studied at the Sorbonne in Paris, decided to take a side trip to London with friends. I boarded the Titanic as a first-class passenger on the evening of April 10th, conveyed aboard the tender SS Nomadic at Cherbourg, France, and then sailed for New York City that night. What a night that was! The ship was magnificent, pure luxury. But on April 14th, disaster struck. I was one of the lucky ones, placed in lifeboat number 6. I tried to rally the other passengers, urging the crew to row back to search for survivors, but they refused. When we were finally rescued by the Carpathia, I helped comfort the other survivors and raised money to help those in need. That's when people started calling me the Unsinkable Molly Brown.
That must have been a life-changing experience. So what are you doing now in your later years?
I continued my philanthropy, helping workers, fighting for women's rights, and even running for the U.S. Senate before women could even vote. During World War I worked with the Red Cross in France. I also dabbled in acting and stayed involved in the arts.
You certainly lived an extraordinary life. How would you like to be remembered?
As someone who never gave up. Whether it was fighting for women's rights, helping the poor, or surviving the Titanic, I always believed in standing up and doing what's right. Wealth didn't change from who I was, it gave me the ability to help others.
Thank you, Margaret, for sharing your incredible story with us today.
My pleasure. And remember, we all have a duty to help those in need.
Margaret's husband, J.J. Brown, died on September 5, 1922. Margaret told newspapers that, although she had met royalty and other great people around the world, "I've never met a finer, bigger, more worthwhile man than J.J. Brown." J.J. Brown left vast yet complicated real estate, mining, and stock holdings. It was unknown to the Browns and their lawyers how much was left in the estate. Prior to J.J.'s death, he had transferred a large amount of money to his children. Their children were also unaware of how much money Margaret had, but were displeased at the large amounts she spent on charity. Margaret Brown and her children fought in court for 6 years to settle the estate. In the 1920s, Margaret Brown focused her energy on personal passions, especially the theater. She died in her sleep at 10:55 p.m. on October 26, 1932, at the age of 65, in New York City's Barbizon Hotel. Subsequent autopsy revealed a brain tumor. She was buried next to J.J. at St. Bridget's Cemetery, now known as Cemetery of the Holy Brood, in Westbury, New York, following a small ceremony on October 31, 1932, attended by close friends and family. There was singing, but no eulogy. And now, another forgotten history. On January 29, 1926, a major milestone in the world of pastries occurred when Troush Bakery in Dubuque, Iowa, introduced the very first donut-making machine. This innovative invention revolutionized the way donuts were made, making the process faster and more efficient. Prior to this machine, donuts were typically made by hand, and the introduction of automation allowed for mass production, making these beloved treats more accessible to the public. The machine itself was a marvel of its time, designed to create perfectly shaped donuts with minimal human intervention. This advancement helped Troush Bakery and other businesses meet the growing demand for donuts, which were already becoming a popular snack across the United States. The invention also helped cement the donut's place in American food culture, contributing to its status as an iconic breakfast item. Today, donuts continue to be enjoyed by millions, thanks in part to the innovation of that machine in 1926. Whether you're a fan of classic glazed donuts or prefer more creative flavors and fillings, it's clear that the donut-making machine played a pivotal role in shaping the pastry industry. So, the next time you indulge in a delicious donut, you can thank Troush Bakery for helping to make it possible. Join us next week when we talk with Benjamin Harrison, the 23rd President of the United States. Until then, take care.